All right, and I show it's 1 o'clock on the nose here, so we will go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today. I appreciate it. I think you made a good choice to show up for this, and I mean it literally because what you're about to hear is real tools. It's not just a list of quotes or hypothetical case studies. It's for people who are actually stuck in the middle, and that's middle managers, and maybe that's you. So you're not the CEO, but you're also not entry level. And you're managing people who need your support, but you're also being managed by people who want results. And then you have peers with lots of needs and opinions too. And those could be people that are working in the same department or an adjacent department. Uh, but the point is that they have needs and opinions. So you can't just make unilateral decisions. You have to include them as well. And some days you feel like this, and you think to yourself, this job just shouldn't be this hard. And that's what happens when you get stuck in the middle. So if any of those things are you, or if you feel like this poor guy on the screen that's smoldering from a little bit of burnout, then this webinar is the right webinar for you. So let's get started with a little bit of honesty. Middle management might be the most misunderstood and undervalued role in the company. And why is that? You're responsible for the output, but you're rarely given the input that you need. You're expected to lead, but you're not always allowed to decide what happens. And then you're told to coach, but you're also drowning in operations, and who has time for coaching? So this isn't a personality problem. It's not even a you problem. It's really a systems problem. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And we're going to start with systems, but I do want to drive home one rule about this webinar. So if you're attending today, here's the one rule. Learning only counts when behavior changes. So what I would ask from you today as we go through this webinar is that you remember this and start thinking about, what behavior could I change tomorrow? How can I prove that I attended Brian's webinar and I learned something and now I'm applying it? Because behavior change is the only real proof of learning. And I just said Brian's webinar, so I'll take a second and introduce myself here in just a moment. So I'm Brian Howard. I'm founder of Peopleist and the current leader of Peopleist, and we help businesses solve people problems. I've been 30 plus years in leadership and people development, and I'm an avid middle manager supporter. Spent the better part of my career focusing on helping middle managers be better. So what are we going to cover today? So as you might guess from the webinar title, we're going to cover leading up so that your voice gets heard at the top. We're going to cover leading down so your teams perform without being micromanaged. And then we're going to talk about leading across so you can cut through all the cross-functional chaos. And we're going to introduce a tool for each one of these. And I promise the tools are not just good, but they're useful. Like, you can start using them this afternoon as soon as you hang up from the webinar. And before we're done, I'll show you the system of putting them all together. And it's important to remember, I said the word system earlier. Your job doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens inside of a system. And for many of you, or for many of us, I should say, it happens inside of a broken system. And so before we jump into the tools, we're going to talk a little bit about systems, and from there we'll move into the tools. So let me show you what I mean. The real problem isn't you. And if you're a middle manager that's feeling like that burned out guy that I showed just a minute ago on the screen, you're not crazy. You're not broken. If it feels harder than it should, you're right. And it's really not your imagination. It's a system issue. And let me show you what I mean by that. So a lot of pretty colors, some gears on the screen. You can see from the gray arrows that things are rotating around. And there you are in the middle as the middle manager. And so every wheel that turns in this turns something else. And that's what you're dealing with. So at the top, you have leadership input. So these are things like your leaders are telling you about strategies, or they're giving you goals or targets, new initiatives that are coming down the pipe. All of a sudden there's a reorganization you have to deal with. And there's always curveballs, lots and lots of curveballs. And there may be more than one manager at the top. It may not just be one manager. So you see in this chart, there's actually two. And at the bottom, you have direct reports, and these direct reports are responsible for execution. And you're trying to make sure you engage them, and you're trying to get the right performance out of them while at the same time making sure you have a good culture, or a culture that supports your direct reports and their performance. And you're stuck right there in the middle. And of course, on the side, you've got peers and other departments. And I mentioned earlier that they have their own needs and priorities. And often those needs and priorities conflict with yours. You can see on the diagram that there's two managers on this diagram, and two managers means those people might have conflicting priorities as well. And so, as you look at the peers, one peer on here reports to your manager, the other peer reports to a different manager. I know as a middle manager, you've probably experienced that before, where everybody has competing priorities. So that's good. You're not just managing tasks, right? You're a conversion gear right in the middle, and your job is to translate these big picture things that happen from your manager, or that get passed down from your manager, translate them into something that your direct reports can use to drive performance. So you're not just managing tasks; you're also managing translation. And when the entire system is not aligned, when one gear is off or you're overloaded as the middle gear, the whole thing breaks. That's rarely good. On top of that, each one of those gears is its own system. So you can think of all of those gears together as one system, but each of those gears is its own little system, and those systems include four things. So the first thing is the input, and I talked about the manager a moment ago giving things like strategy and reorganizations, new initiatives. Those are all inputs that you're given as a middle manager, but they're also given those things, and your direct reports are also given inputs from you. So in this case, the system has strategy. The inputs would be things like strategy, pressure, change, those types of things, which are uh, which are good. We need those, right? We need inputs, and we'll talk a minute about how those work. And then you have processes too. So processes for you might be decision making, it might be communicating to your team, it might be coordination. But for your direct reports, it could be actually doing a step by step process, following some type of process that produces an output. So maybe if you were in a banking system and you were underwriting mortgage loans, there's a step by step process you go through to do that. So the input would be the application for the mortgage, and the process would be the step by step process that your employees take to process those loans. And then there's outputs, of course, and you hope those are correct. From your point of view, your output would be performance, could be morale of the team, could be engagement of the team, could also be culture. For your direct reports, an output is something usually tangible. So if you were producing widgets, the output would be the widget itself. And then finally, there's feedback loops, and feedback comes from all over the place, whether you want it or not. And it comes from like leaders, from the front line, from peers, from you to your team, and to peers. And like I said, all of that stuff happens whether you like it or not. There's feedback. Some of it's good and useful. Some of it's not so good and not so useful. And and so that's the system. So you have all of these gears that we talked about a moment ago, and you're in the middle. And then each of those has a system within it. And so a lot of times feedback loops are ignored or blocked or filtered beyond recognition. And so here you are stuck in the middle. You're trying to move three different gears at once: manager, peer, and direct. You don't have any oil, don't have any tools, don't have any authority. It's really a tough spot to be in. And so that's what I was telling you before, is it's it's one of the most uh, undervalued positions in the company, but certainly one of the most important in the company, because you're literally the person as a middle manager who makes the whole company turn. So I'd like to give you an example. And so I'm going to walk through one that hopefully will make a lot of sense. And so what you see on the screen right now is a diagram of a print shop. So it might be familiar to some of you, might not be at all familiar to others, but this has the exact same things that you have in your work. And so I'm going to spell them all out real quick for you. So leadership drops off raw content, and in this case, you have the person sitting at the computer, and that person in picture number one there, sitting at the computer, she's creating uh, inputs. And so what is she doing? She's creating whatever is going to come off of that printer next. Maybe she's creating a book or a pamphlet or a brochure that's going to go to a customer later, and she's creating all of that. And she is a complete system. She got inputs from somebody, maybe from marketing or from copywriters, and now she's doing the artwork to get it ready for the printer. So that's her process that she's going through. And then at some point, she will produce an output, and that output will go to the next to the next department, which is the printing department where the press is. And they might look at it and say, "Hey, there's some errors on here, or these colors aren't correct, or something's wrong with this," and send it back to her. And it may go through several iterations before the printer accepts it. And once it does, the printer would be next. So the people running the printer, and they have inputs too, right? They have the input, which is the art that she just gave them. They have the paper that they're putting in the machine. They have the ink that's represented by the CMYK colors on the printing machine here. And their job is to take all of those inputs, run them through their step-by-step processes to create something printed, and then create an output. And you can see the person at the end is looking at what comes out of the what comes out of the printer, and they're looking to see, did this come out the way we expected it to? If it did, great. It moves on to the next department. If it didn't, then they would go back to the front of the press and say, this is the wrong paper, it's the wrong size, the colors are not correct, there's not enough ink. Just imagine what all of those things could be. But if they do a good job, then they would move on to number four. Now, number four is looking at this giant piece of paper, and his job is to turn it into a booklet. And so he's looking to see, does the input work? Is what they gave me good enough to put into this machine to make these books or booklets, whatever they are? And so now he's going to say, okay, the inputs are good. I'm going to follow my process. And that process is to put it into this machine that creates books. So you take that giant sheet of paper, you put it into this machine, you set up the machine. Those are the processes. You press the start button, and then books start coming out of the other end. And there's a person at the other end who's looking to see whether or not the books are good. So as you can see, we started with art, which is an input. We went to the printing press, which has art as the input, printing as the output. Now we've gone to this folding machine or bookmaking machine, and again, inputs and outputs. So this is how all of these systems work. And then you can see at the end, just to close out the example, that now the booklets are made, and somebody in step 6 here is another department that is boxing them up, and you can see the shipping labels on the side. And so those are going out to maybe their customers, maybe they've been sold, maybe they're Amazon books or something like that. But the point is, even this has inputs. So the inputs are the book, the processes are the shipping labels, the boxes, the maybe the address, the customer relationship management tool, all of those things that provide for the shipping department. And then ultimately it lands on the consumer's desk, or it could be a brochure that goes to a trade show to the salespeople. So you can have this infinite supply of loops as you go through all of these things. But the main thing is, and this is important, you're not just managing your team, you're managing their work, you're managing their morale, and then just as I demonstrated in the print shop there, you're managing all of their downstream impact. And that is whether you know what that impact is or not. In some cases, you will. In other cases, you don't know what happens to it after it leaves you. You just know you have to produce a quality product so that the next person to get it will be able to use it. So your outputs become someone else's inputs almost every time. And to me, that sounds pretty simple. Maybe it does to you too. So the big question is, why is it so hard? And the answer is the middle manager paradox. So you have the inputs, processes, outputs. We talked about all that. What you don't have is you don't have authority. So you're not really sure who's in charge of all of those things. You probably have misaligned priorities. We talked about that a moment ago when I showed you the gears. And then you have conflicting feedback. So some people think what you did is good. Some people think it's terrible. Other people might tell you that it's good, but they have an ulterior motive for saying that. And then you do all of it with constant overload. So you're always overworked. So I told you before that we would do the 3 tools, and here's why we'll do that. And my goal with the 3 tools is to help get rid of some of these things. So we're going to try to get rid of misaligned priorities, try to get rid of unclear authority, try to get rid of conflicting feedback, and then hopefully, with some more cooperation, get rid of some of the constant overload. And we can start that by talking about managing up, which is influencing without authority. So we're going to introduce the first tool here, and you're expected to execute strategy, but you weren't in the room when the strategy was made. How many times have you said, "I wish I was in that meeting. I could have heard the same thing you heard." Or you're told to drive results, but you don't control the resources. So they're saying, "Hey, we need these results and we need them quick," and you're like, "I just asked for more headcount, and you said no." Or something's broken and you need leadership buy-in to fix it, but they're not listening. And I know as a middle manager, these are things that you've all experienced. And that's because managing up isn't about volume, it's about framing. And so I'm going to help you with that. Executives talk in this shorthand, and the more time you spend with executives, the more of this shorthand you hear. And what they really want to know is what's wrong, what's happening right now, and what do you want from me? And if you can answer those 3 questions for them, you're golden. And if you can't, they're gone. They just completely quit listening. So here's your first tool out of the 3 that I promised you. And this is a executive clarity script. So what is the clarity? So 3 words. This is the formula. You want to tell them the impact that whatever problem you have has on their business. You want to talk about what initiative you've taken already. So what have you done about it so far? And then you want to have a very solid ask, like what do you need from them? And so what's the opportunity or what's the business risk or opportunity? What's already being done about it? And what do you need from them? So what I'd love to do is go through a couple of examples because I know this sounds simple, but let's look at examples that show you what it looks like. And we'll talk about the old way that maybe you used to do it, or maybe you've seen people do it, and then we'll talk about what the new way looks like using the clarity script. So example number 1. So your team is missing deadlines because they're constantly pulled into meetings. I know you've experienced that before. I know I've certainly experienced it before. And it's like you get to the end of the day and you said, I have so many meetings today, I didn't have time to do my work. And so that happens to your team as well. So here's the old way. You go to your manager and you say, "Look, my team is overwhelmed. We're just in too many meetings." And you tell them that thinking that something's going to happen. Unfortunately, to them, it sounds like a complaint, and you didn't say what they should do about it. You just brought them a complaint. So here's the new way using the impact initiative and ask model. So first you would say something like, "Hey, we've had 3 project delays this quarter because our frontline team is averaging about 18 hours a week in meetings." So notice that you're talking about the problem and you're quantifying it with the 18 hours. And then you say, initiative, "Hey, I've I've already piloted no meeting zone from 9 to 11 a.m. and that's helping. So you're giving people time to work and you're telling them, I took initiative and did this, it's helping. And then you give them the ask. What I'd like is support from you in setting this as a broader policy across our department. So now they know what the problem and impact is. They know what you've done about it so far and that it's helped. And now you're asking them specifically to support you in setting this as a broader policy across our department. It frames you as a leader instead of a bottleneck. And for me, this is how you get results. This is something that your leader will respond to. So here's another example. Your team's burning out from after hour messages and emails. And so in the old way, you might go to your manager and tell them what your problem is, which is my team's burning out. People keep messaging us at all hours of the night. The problem is, to your leader, that sounds reactive. And again, what should they do about it? Like, what are you asking for? You're just telling them what's wrong. So here's the new way using impact, initiative, and ask. You can say something like, our retention risk is rising. I've seen a 40% spike in after hour messages this month. And then here's the initiative. What have you done about it so far? I've reminded my team to use scheduled send, and I've even modeled that myself. And so now you're going to make the ask. I'd like your backing to include this in our manager communications and reinforce it organization wide. So again, they know what the impact is, what kind of disruption it's causing. They know what you've done about it so far, that you're not just being helpless, you're trying to do something. And now you're asking for a very specific thing that would affect the entire organization. So now they can either easily say yes or no, which is the most important part of these. Now, this new way, impact, initiative, ask, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to, that you won't get ignored. You still might get ignored. You still might get a quick no, but clarity is leverage for you. So if you follow this path instead of just bringing problems, you'll get yeses a lot more often than you get nos. So what I'd love for you to do here is just pause for a second and think. And we're not going to do an exercise here or anything. Just want you to think for 1 second. Like, what's one issue you need leadership to take seriously right now? You came in here today with some things on your mind, I know. What is that one thing? If you could take it to your manager right now and create an ask for them, what would that thing be? Jot it down so you remember it after the webinar. And then use the impact, initiative, ask model to reframe how you'll present it. So write down, what are you going to say? What is the impact of what's happening right now? What have you done about it so far? And if you could ask for something very specific, something they could easily answer yes or no to, what would you ask? All right. So we did managing up. Now let's do managing down, which is, in my world, leading without micromanaging. Managing shouldn't be adversarial or passive. And here's the two biggest traps that I see people fall into as middle managers. It's really two extremes. So the first one is micromanaging because you're afraid of failure. And you're afraid of your own failure, of course. That's why you micromanage, but you're also afraid that your team will fail. And so you don't want them to fail, which makes you a failure. So you tell them exactly what to do and exactly how to do it at every moment of the day. You hover, and that's rarely good. And then the second way people manage is they avoid. So they avoid things because they're afraid of conflict. So they don't want to get in fights with their team. They want their team to like them. And so those managers just avoid talking about things. They avoid issues and they say, no, you're doing good. It's not you. Everything's okay. Just keep doing what you're doing. And they avoid the hard conversations. And neither one of those things is useful. Neither works out. And I guarantee you that it will burn you out and it will burn your employees out if you do either of these. And a lot of managers do. So the key is to set expectations and coach consistently without hovering or disappearing. And hovering is a classic sign of micromanagement, and disappearing is a classic sign of avoidance. So how do you do that? So here's tool number 2 of the 3 that I promised you. So this is called the clarity and coaching checklist. It's very simple. It's only 4 questions, and this is something you can ask yourself when you're thinking about an employee or thinking about doing a one-on-one or assigning work. We'll go over some examples of this, and I have several examples for you so that you can see how it works in different contexts. But it's pretty simple. Do they know what's expected of them, and do they know when it's due or when it's needed? Vague goals equal vague outcomes. So really got to be specific on this. Have I given them the space to try and fail without fear? If uh, if you've ever tried to learn a foreign language, it's very difficult. And when you first start off, you're definitely going to fail. You're definitely going to feel self conscious and embarrassed. And a lot of times, one of the problems people have with learning a foreign language is they're great at trying Duolingo or JumpSpeak or one of the language apps. But when it comes time to actually talking to somebody, they feel silly. So they don't want to fail in front of anybody. And so they have a fear of failure. And that's bad. For employees, they not only have a fear of failure, but they also have a fear of the repercussions of failure, which could be losing their job. So ask yourself, have I given them space to try? Have I given them an opportunity to feel silly and do that without the fear of repercussions? Because growth doesn't happen in a pressure cooker. And then next, do I check for insight, not just updates? And what does that mean? So a status isn't coaching. You get together and you say, tell me how the project is going. And they say, oh, it's green. We're good. Everything's going well. Ask them about their thinking, not just what they're doing. Like, how did you come to that decision? What were you thinking when you gave this update? What were you thinking when you developed this strategy or this chart? What were you hoping to get from the other people in the project, the stakeholders? Ask them those types of questions to check for insights, and that's where you can really help employees grow. And we'll cover an example of that. And then finally, do I model what I want to see? So your tone, your clarity, and ownership that sets the ceiling for theirs. So if you don't act the way you want them to act, they won't either. It's very much don't do as I do, do as I say. That doesn't work. And so if you're trying to do it, you have to model what you want to see. So you have to do all of these things too, which, by the way, in some cases means being silly and failing in front of your team. Because if you won't do it, why would they feel safe doing it? So let's look at a few examples. So the first one is setting the bar early. So the old way, you might say something like, hey, can you get that draft done by Thursday? Well, that's vague, leaves too much to interpretation, but I know we've all, as managers, been guilty of saying something exactly like that. And you might get a yes, but it doesn't really say much else. So the new way would follow those 4 questions I talked about before, and it would say, "Hey, by the end of Thursday, I need a client-ready draft with these 3 things: a summary, a timeline, and a list of open risks." And before you dive in, I'd like you to walk me through your first steps. It's not about getting it perfect; it's about building the right thinking from the start. And so, does this do all of those things? Does it hit all 4 of those questions that we asked before? I think so. It gives specific instructions. It gives them space to try it without fear. You're coaching for insight, and then you're modeling what you want to see. And you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to help you get it right from the beginning, and then it's yours." Here's another example. So this could be a mid-project course correction. So the old way would be, "Hey, how's the project going?" The problem with that is it invites a status update, but not a strategic reflection. So the new way would be, hey, we're halfway through and I'm seeing a little bit of drift on the scope of this project. Can you show me how you're mapping your priorities to the original ask? If something's unclear or off, now's the time to reset, and I'm happy to help you sort it out. This accomplishes all 4 of those, and it does so without micromanaging or avoiding. A couple more examples. Here's one for a responsibility handoff. So you're giving them a new responsibility. So the old way would be, hey, I'm giving this to you. Let me know if you have any questions. So that hands the tasks off without really equipping them to lead it, doesn't provide much specifics. So the new way would be, hey, this is yours to lead now. Here's the outcome I care about. I need X result on Y timeline. Make a plan, let's talk through it, and then you're going to own it. And if you hit roadblocks, don't wait to bring them. That's part of growing into this. So this hits all four of the questions positively from the checklist. And then the last example is helping them recover from a miss. So you can see these are all different ways to use this. You might have said in the old days, look, this is not good. You need to fix it. It just didn't meet the mark. So that triggers shame, not learning. It didn't really teach them anything. You just told them they messed up, and they already know they messed up. Chances are pretty good. So the new way would be saying, that really didn't land the way we hoped. And, that's okay. It happens. But let's unpack what you were aiming for and where it veered off. I'm here to help you sharpen your judgment, not just fix the work. So here we're not just saying you should do it this way and then begin the micromanagement process because they failed. Here's where you're actually coaching insights. Say, show me how you decided to do it this way so that I can help you correct the judgment, not just, change bullet points on the slide deck. And here's the main part of this that's super important is you're not managing their performance. You're managing the conditions that produce performance. Let me say it again. You're managing the conditions that produce performance. So the conditions are clarity, safety, coaching, not just for status, but for insights. Those are the conditions. And if you produce those regularly, you'll be super impressed by the incredible results that you get from your employees. So let's just take 1 second and pause and think of a person that you're currently frustrated with. And I know everybody has one. There's one. Think of the specific person, like say the name to yourself. Picture them in your office, sitting directly across from you, and remember right now why you're frustrated with them. And get that picture in your head. And then use the checklist. Are they unclear on what they're supposed to be doing? Are they afraid to fail, or at least afraid of the repercussions of failing? Are they getting the coaching that they need? Are they seeing you be a good role model for what you expect from them? So what's one conversation you can have this week to shift that? One conversation you can have with an employee. You should go back and do that today after this webinar is over. Tomorrow, I challenge you to. All right. So the third tool, managing across. This is about collaboration without control. And when I say control here, I mean authority. Because the quality of your cross-functional relationships determines how effective you are in your job. And you can have the best employees in the world. You can have the most well-meaning managers in the world. But if your cross-functional relationships are broken, you just won't get anything done. And that's a sad way to go down for middle managers. And guess what? Got a tool for that too. So this is the third tool that I promised. And then after this, we're going to put these all together. This is called the Collaboration Kickstart Questions. It's very simple. And if you do this, you'll be successful in creating those cross-functional collaborations I just talked about. So ask yourself these 3 questions, because you don't directly control this. So you have to negotiate a bit. And this is the place from which you negotiate. Excuse me while I take a drink. So the 3 questions, you can see them on the screen. What do they need from me to succeed? They meaning the other departments or your peers, because collaboration starts with contribution. there's an old saying that says we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And in this case, collaboration is really bolstered by the idea of giving first. It also follows a rule called the law of reciprocity, which says anytime you give someone something without expecting something in return, they'll feel the need to reciprocate, to give back. And what they give back might be worth way more than what you gave them. Uh, it's not necessarily value for value. It's the idea that you did something first, so then they feel the need to do something as well to even things up. So, what do they need from me to succeed? The second thing is what do I need from them? And then, even more importantly, have I actually said it out loud? A lot of times, you know what you need. Maybe your manager knows what you need. Maybe even their manager knows what you need, but they don't. Nobody even bothered to say it to them. So most friction comes from just assuming and from not saying anything. You can avoid that with question two. And then finally, question three, and this one's super important. What shared outcomes can we anchor on? So you're not fighting each other, you're fighting the friction between the two of you. And that is something that you can smooth out. So let me give you a few examples here. So using the questions, here's the one that's a missed handoff between departments. And you can picture those two guys screaming at each other on the slide I showed you a little earlier. Uh, the old way, your team was supposed to hand that off last week, and now we're blocked. So that sounds reactive. It sounds accusatory. And if you're on the other side of that, if somebody said that to you, you would immediately get defensive, or most people would anyway. So there's a better way. And the new way is this. Look, I think we both want to avoid delays. So what do you need from us to ensure a smooth handoff? And here's what we need on our side, and here's when we need it. So let's sync up to make sure neither team is left hanging. So this does all of the things. It covers all of the questions. It tells you what you're going to give them. It tells you what you need from them. And then it says, I think we both want to avoid delays and neither team wants to be left hanging. That's the mutual payoff for giving each other what you need. And here's another example. This is support from a peer in another region. So think about the old way. You're mad and you say, I don't know why they're not prioritizing this. We've asked them 3 times. Have you ever thought that or said that out loud or heard someone say that? I know I have. And it creates distance and it creates frustration. It's not a good look. So here's the new way. You can say, hey, can I level with you? This project really needs your team's input by Friday or we're going to miss the window. Here's what I need. I know that's going to be hard, so I can flex on timing elsewhere to support your workload. What's realistic for you, and how do we keep each other in the loop going forward? Now, you can do it the first way, the old way. Chances are pretty good you're going to get the hand because they're not going to help if they feel defensive. The second way brings them in. It makes it a partnership. Again, it tells them what you're planning to give them. I can flex on timing elsewhere to support your workload. Like, I don't need everything at once, but I do need this. And then you're asking them, what can you do for me? So this is a good example. And the last one. So what I just described to you is not soft, it's strategic. And what you're really doing when you follow this method, those 3 questions, is you're lowering defensiveness and raising clarity. And in cross-functional work, that's the key to unlocking success. So if the 2 departments or multiple departments are clear on what's going on, if they understand what the inputs and outputs are, like we demonstrated in the print shop graphic, and if you're speaking in a way that lowers defenses instead of puts them up, anytime you make somebody put their guard up, you're not going to get what you want. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to get stonewalled. So if you find ways to lower defensiveness, then you can have better partnerships. And that's what those three tools do for you. So, like we've done with the other tools, love to take a moment here and and just think about one peer, one team, or one department that you keep bumping into. So, who are they? Who is that person that you keep bumping into? What's the problem? And then ask yourself the questions here. What do they actually need from you? What do you need from them? What could you be clearer about? And what shared goal can you use to realign? What's something that's a mutual benefit if you both give each other what you need? These questions will solve problems for you, I promise it. And I think that's probably why you're here to begin with, is again to get out of the paradox, the middle manager paradox. All right, so let's tie it all together. You saw the system, the inputs, the processes, the outputs, the feedback, and I showed you how this is how work gets done. And every unit in the gear model that I showed you is um is doing the same thing. They all have inputs, they all have processes, they all have outputs, and there's feedback flying everywhere. And so, how do you make them all work together? And that's the real question. At the center of it is you. And so, you're not just a manager, you're not just a translator either. You're the conversion gear, the one that sits in the middle of the machine and makes everything happen. Without you, if you take you out of the mix, nothing gets done below you. There's nothing going from the manager to the directs. Your peers can't have clarity and they can't get the work they need out of your directs if you're missing out of the middle. So that role doesn't usually come with enough clarity. It doesn't come with support. It doesn't come with tools. But I just gave you three, and hopefully those three will be helpful for you. And what you learned here is to speak up to leadership in a way that they actually hear. If you speak their language, you'll get more responses, more favorable responses too. If you set expectations and coach your team without micromanaging and without avoiding, you'll do much better. And now you have a tool to help you do that. And then finally, we just covered how to collaborate across teams without getting steamrolled. And I think you'll all agree that good collaboration, good cross-functional collaboration, will make your job so much easier. You already have enough issues managing up to your manager and managing down to your directs. The last thing you want to do is get in fights with adjacent departments as well. Um, that's rarely good for anyone. And a lot of times, I've seen this in the past. If you fight with your peers, your managers see it, and it can actually keep you from getting promoted in the future. Maybe them too. So I just want to leave you with a couple of things. At Peopleist, we know, and I said this before, learning only counts when behavior changes. So if you attended this webinar today and your behavior doesn't change after you leave, it doesn't change this afternoon, it doesn't change tomorrow when you get to work. If you don't start instituting these tools, then you didn't learn anything, and I fell down on my job. So I'm hopeful that you'll go back and try a few of these things, see that they work, and then start to have real behavior change. So my question to you is, what's the one thing you'll start doing differently this week? What's the conversation you need to reframe, clarify, or just restart a relationship? Remember that if you were doing it bad before, it doesn't mean the relationship is ruined. The relationship with your manager, the relationship with your direct reports, the relationship with your peers or other department leaders is not ruined. You can start again. And so, no matter where you are, if you start using the tools tomorrow, people will notice, and it will be game changing for you as a middle manager. So, at Peopleist, we solve people problems for businesses. So if you have a people problem that you need to solve and you're having trouble with it, we can help. And you can visit our website at peopleist.com to see the services that we offer. And if you'd like a handout for all the tools that we covered today, just send me an email at brian.howard@peopleist.com at the bottom here. Just put middle manager in the subject line. If you would put your make sure you have your name. Not everybody's email address shows their name. Make sure you include your name and your company name, if you would, in the body of the email. But just put middle manager in the subject line, and we'll shoot you over a handout with all the tools today. So if you took notes or if you missed a few things, that's okay. We'll provide it to you. And so that's a wrap for us. Really appreciate you being here today. And we'll look forward to our next webinar, which, by the way, will be delegating confidently with the Peopleist let go model. So thanks. Look forward to seeing you again soon.